Hey, what's up guys? And today we're gonna make a modern classic that is sweet and tart and smoky, and it's called a penicillin. It's a Scotch-based cocktail that actually has two kinds of Scotch in it. It's one of those drinks where if you told me that, hey man, I don't like Scotch, I'd say, well, try this drink. And you'd probably turn around and say, damn, that is a good drink. Anyway, if you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button if you want more Drinks with Dave. And now, let's go make a penicillin. Now, the penicillin sounds like an old-timey cocktail, like it's like 100 years old, but it's actually not. It was created in 2005 by a bartender named Sam Ross, who worked at the famous New York City cocktail bar called Milk and Honey. The drink was a riff on another Milk and Honey original cocktail called the Gold Rush. And the Gold Rush is basically a bourbon sour, but instead of using sugar to sweeten it, honey is used in its place. So basically we had a sour format that led to the Gold Rush and then to the penicillin. But when Sam Ross came up with the penicillin, he took this format and he decided to abandon the bourbon altogether. And instead he used a blended Scotch as the base. And instead of just using honey to sweeten it, he added in ginger, which gave it a whole nother level of complexity and a gingery bite. So then you got a cocktail that's got lemon and ginger and honey, and this is probably where the name penicillin came from, because all of those ingredients have long time been associated with, curing ailments. And on top of that, the real penicillin, the antibiotic, was created by a Scottish doctor and scientist. So the connections are all there and the name makes total sense. What really makes this cocktail unique is that there's two kinds of scotches in it. And I don't know if it was a stroke of genius or what, but Sam Ross decided to add another layer to the cocktail by floating some Islay Scotch on top. And Islay Scotch is known for being very, very smoky, very, very heavy with peat and with funk, and some people even say it's kind of medicinal. You gotta be careful with it because it can overpower all of the other ingredients in a cocktail, and not everybody's a huge fan. But this only gets a small float, and it works like magic with the other ingredients, and it's probably one of the reasons why this cocktail has become the modern classic that it has. Now let's dig into the other ingredients and the booze we're gonna use. To make a penicillin cocktail, we're gonna need blended Scotch, Islay Scotch, lemon juice, honey syrup, and ginger. I'm using Dewar's White Label for the blended Scotch. There's a lot of comparable Scotches out there. Famous Grouse would work. Monkey Shoulder, I think, is a step up from there, but this works perfectly fine. The Islay Scotch that I'm using is Laphroaig 10-year. This is big, big smoke. A little bit of this is gonna go a long way in the cocktail. The lemon juice, of course, always use fresh squeeze. And for the honey syrup, I'm just using a 1-to-1 ratio, honey to water. If you like it sweeter, you can always go with a richer syrup. Now, I wanna talk about the ginger for a second. And we're gonna be using fresh ginger today to get the flavor into the drink. And you don't really need to do much to this other than make sure that it's clean. And we're just gonna cut it into 1/8 to 1/4 inch nickel slices. Now there are a couple of other different ways that you can get the ginger flavor into the penicillin. And if you were gonna be making a whole lot of these cocktails, I would recommend making a honey ginger syrup. But I find this to be a much more practical way to make the drink, especially if we're just gonna make one. So let's just go ahead and get started. This is gonna be a shake and drink, so you can use a tin to build this in, but since we're using the fresh ginger today and I wanna show you, I'm gonna use a pint glass. We'll start by adding the ginger, and I'm gonna use 3 of these nickels that I cut. And then we'll just muddle this to try and extract as much flavor and juice as possible. And I like to kind of press and twist. Starts to grind it all up into kind of a mushy paste. And once it's nice and pulverized, it should look a little bit like this. Next, we will add 2 ounces of our blended Scotch, 3/4 of an ounce of the fresh lemon juice, and 3/4 of an ounce of the honey syrup. Then add ice, and then give it a shake for about 15 or 20 seconds. You really want to incorporate all that flavor that's mixing in there. And we'll add a nice piece of clear ice and double strain the cocktail off over it. And we want to leave a little bit of room because we're going to float our Laphroaig on top. Just gonna add a 1/4 ounce. We just want this to float on the very top. And the traditional garnish is candied ginger, which I actually have been hanging on to for a while because I've been meaning to do this episode. Place the ginger on the top, just kind of like pinch the rim. That is a penicillin cocktail. First of all, you smell that peat and that smoke coming at you long before it gets to your nose. I like this drink with fresh ginger. If you use a honey ginger syrup, it can kind of change the flavor a little bit. The candied ginger is not a must. If you got it, it's great. A lemon peel works perfectly fine, or this thing really doesn't need any garnish at all. It's sweet, it's tart, it's smoky, it's just super complex, and I really think that this is one of those like Scotch drinks that if you don't like Scotch, you might end up liking this drink just because it's kind of got this sour vibe going on. Then I don't really have anything else to say about it, so on to the next drink, and until next time, cheers.